Hey guys, so this week on Collected Edition, we're looking at Spectacular Spider-Man 310 by Chip Zdarsky. I'm Caden.
I'm Dan.
Awesome. So this is like really, if not one of my favorite Spider-Man comics of all time, maybe one of my favorite comics of all time. It came out in 2018. It was Chip Zdarsky's like goodbye to his Spectacular Spider-Man run. He did about 23, 24 issues. And at the time, he didn't think he was going to write any more of the character. That's actually one thing I really respect about Zdarsky is it doesn't matter if he has an 8-issue story or if he has like a 50-issue story. He's just going to write what he writes. And when he's done, he'll leave the book and he's content with that. And I think I think a lot of comic book writers don't have the strength to do that. I think they get a little too attached, but he just kind of left for it. But Dan, what did you think of this book?
So you've talked about your man crush on Chip Zdarsky many times,
Yeah.
and I'm starting to see why that might be justified. I what I lack in depth of comic reading, I make up for in sheer chaotic random sampling. And so
Mhm.
while I can't say that I'm an educated reader, I have read a lot of stuff, right? And this is quite possibly. I got to agree with you. It's possibly my. I think it's regardless. I think it's a stellar, iconic example of like a perfect comic set piece, right? Like it does everything. It's got this range. It's got the art. It's got the dialogue. The emotional hooks. It's just incredibly well executed, and I really enjoyed it.
And I guess for those of you that are listening, yes, I have this self-admitted like man crush on Chip Zdarsky. I didn't realize it until about a year and a half ago, but I think it's because of this book in particular. I have accidentally read every book that he's worked on just through happenstance. Um, and I don't know, he is just. We've talked about it before off mic, but he has perfected the comic book writer persona of just being able to peddle himself in the best way possible. Where it's Zdarsky is a brand at this point,
He is, yeah, yeah, and a well managed one. He's incredibly method.
and I think the one thing that you and I have talked about is the sincerity of Chip Zdarsky in his work. And for those of you that don't know, he doesn't take himself seriously like at all. It seems very dismissive, but this is probably the most sincere comic I've read in the past 10 years. I absolutely adore it. I don't even know if I can summarize it, you know, in a way that will do it justice, but the basic outline structure of the book is we're using a framing device of a student who is, finishing his time at film school, and he is interviewing the people of New York and asking them what they think of Spider-Man. And we see a series of vignettes along the way. And this is something that Zdarsky told me at Rose City Comic Con when I got him to sign this book for me. Is that couple at the beginning of the book that are talking about Spider-Man? Those are actually his parents that he has drawn into the book, and
That's awesome.
he's like, yeah, I don't know, of course, like I drew my parents in, and then he's like, that's every comic book writer or artist. Their constant struggle is trying to justify to their parents why they're doing this, and having to deal with their parents hoping for when they'll get a real job.
Right.
You see varying degrees of how people appreciate Spider-Man. From the upper echelons, we see Captain America, and he says, Spider-Man, his mask might be off-putting and his sense of humor might be as well, but at the end of the day, he is the greatest of one of us. And that, at the same time, we see other people who are like, yeah, no, he wrecked my car in a fight with a freaking vampire, and when my father and I get our legal hands on him, he's toast. But I don't know. This book, Spider-Man, is difficult for me at this point because I think really Spider-Man means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and depending on who you are, that can be wildly different. For me, this book is able to just pipeline what I think Spider-Man is, and clearly what Zdarsky thinks Spider-Man is, and it just connects with me. I think there's a lot of heart to this book, and it's also like a lot of classic, Zdarsky humor. I think that's the other reason why Spider-Man is such a great fit for Zdarsky. Is if you read his newsletter or anything else that he does, Zdarsky's great at talking to an audience that really doesn't exist. Writing for himself in a humorous way, and he's able to masterfully do that because Spider-Man is always talking to himself. And and I think this is one of the big things that I've struggled with the film adaptations of Spider-Man is they've never really gotten that quite yet. They're always kind of dancing around it, but I judge a lot of Spider-Man writers of how good Peter's internal, or I guess sometimes external monologue is, and Zdarsky nails it right out of the gate.
Yeah, it feels to me, honestly, like author insert fan fiction, to
Mhm.
be honest. Like if he were Spider-Man, like this is the dialogue he would have. I don't know if that's true or
Yeah.
not, but he puts it across in such a way that it feels genuine.
Yeah, no, well, and that's the thing is, I don't know. This book is so genuine across the board because it tackles every facet of Spider-Man. You know, it doesn't shy away from the fact that he is kind of a bum at times. Spider-Man is a perpetual loser, but
Mooching those free hot dogs.
yeah, no, there's this great instance where this poor hot dog salesman, he's like, Spider-Man's great, he saved me and all, but and then we cut to this, fight between Venom and Scorpion and Spider-Man, and he saves this guy's hot dog cart, and the guy promises him free hot dogs for life. Where in turn, Spider-Man has been going there ever since every day to get a
Every
hot dog,
day.
just
Guy's
talking
like, come on, man.
talking this poor guy's ear off. uh, and we see that appreciated by other people in the book, though. They're like, Spider-Man is always selfless, and he's clearly not doing it for money. He's clearly not doing it for personal gain. They're like, oh, how do you know that? And he's like, because I see him eating free hot dogs every day.
Right. Yeah.
But the one part of this book that every time I read it, I have to try, I really have to try not to cry, is we see this interaction between Spider-Man and these, like, they're like robbing a bodega in New York, and he
Very
webs
small
up,
time.
yeah, small time crooks. They the one of them pulls a gun on, on Spidey. He webs him up. The police show up. He goes and chases after the third guy. Finds out it's like a 12-year-old kid, who was paid $50 to just watch the store, and Spider-Man just webs him up to the wall, out of the sight of the police, and says, "We got away." Like, I don't know what
Yeah,
to
he
tell
probably
you.
had some superpowers, man.
Yeah,
I don't know how he did it.
we ought to regulate these things. uh, but it shows that just beyond that, like, not only was Peter willing to save this kid this misfortune, the documentary is interviewing this kid's mom, but beyond that, he's coming back to this kid's apartment and he's tutoring him. He's trying to help him out, just trying to get this kid set on the right track because, through the mom's dialogue, what's revealed, dad's locked up. This kid was really struggling, and Peter's just trying to set him up. And he comes back one day, kid's gone. Mom comes out, breaks down, hugs him, and it's revealed that the guys that had robbed the bodega have taken out the kid. And this is just another moment where this book is just riddled for me with, just classic Spider-Man zingers, but this moment's done zero dialogue. We know exactly what happened. And we see Spider-Man go after these guys. And this is one of those things where, again, it just kind of captures Spider-Man for me because we've talked about Daredevil and how, Daredevil's always pissed at the world. But I think when Peter's pissed, that's the one you need to look out for.
Yeah, you could take just this one little story, right? And
Hmm.
it's a perfect three-act play, in the way that it's presented, right? You could take just that set of panels around the kid and his mom and Spider-Man, and they would make a good standalone comic story all by themselves,
Yeah,
right?
no.
But interleaved with the rest of the stuff as lighthearted or as messily human as the rest of it is, it just really offsets or by contrast, it really shows how important the hero work is to Peter and how it's really just it's a series of very small events that add up to something really big. Everybody
Hmm.
sees the big stuff, but for Peter, that's just one of the parts of it, right? And
Yeah.
like the rest of it is just he just loves this place and he loves the people who are here.
It's just doing the right thing because it is the right thing to do and nothing
Right.
beyond that. And, of course, we see him capture these guys and leave them for the police, and he just breaks down and cries. And I don't know, it's just, I think another amazing moment is, the mother could blame Spider-Man for this. And I think a lesser writer would have the mother do this, but she knows that, like, this kid's life, even if it was cut short, unfortunately, was made better because of Spider-Man. And I think that's a really, I don't know, it's just really, it gets to me every single time. And she has this line where she says, "I think we should all be a little bit more like Spider-Man." And I'm like, "Oh,"
Oh, yeah.
that's where I'm just like, I'm holding it back every single time I read this book, and that's where I'm just like, "Oh man, I fall apart." But so then we leave the framing device, we cut to the guy that's actually making the documentary, this film student, and he leaves his editing bay, and he's confronted by Peter outside, and he's like, "Hey, I just want to know what you're making here." The student shares this anecdote about when he was a teenager. Spider-Man was in a fight with Doc Ock. Doc Ock slaps some garbage can, or maybe it was Peter, we don't know, slaps a garbage can. This kid gets covered in trash, just minutes before this date he has at the age of 15. And, and once Peter's wrapped up Doc Ock, he looks back and he sees this kid just drenched in trash, and he's like, "Oh no!" And he gives him, he takes out his backpack and he gives him Peter Parker's clothes. And of course, it's the Ditko Stan Lee era clothes, where it's the button-up shirt with the sweater vest and the
The
tie.
tie, yeah.
And this student, he turns to him. He's like, "Yeah." And in that moment, I realized that you were just a guy,
Yeah,
and more importantly, at this point, you were a kid, and
yeah.
one
With
with
poor taste in clothes, but
poor
still just a
taste.
kid.
And Spider-Man asks, he's like, "Oh, how did the date go?" He's like, "I was 15. How do you think it went?" And he's like, "Fair enough." And the student just wants to know how Spider-Man found out about the documentary in the first place. And the very last interview of the book is Peter Parker, in his civvies, talking to the student. And he says, "Oh, you might not want to interview me. I have a conflict of interest." And we get this perfect distillation of like Spider-Man history in just a panel, which is another great element of like Zdarsky's writing, is he's just able to condense all of the Peter Parker Spider-Man relationship in a second. But he says he knows he makes mistakes, and he knows he makes very human mistakes, but at the end of the day, Spider-Man's always going to try no matter what, and he's never going to stop trying. And I'm just like, oh, like this is Spider-Man for me. And I think the most important thing for me in this book is the fact that it shows that Spider-Man is for the little guy. He is a street level hero. He's not trying to stop galactic level threats. He's just worrying about, how he can help the everyday person that he might encounter.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about it being the perfect distillation of Spider-Man. I think it nails that. I love that, and I think it, more than that, I think it nails something that's a bit more rare, I think, in comics, and that is that, like, I think there's genuinely something there, and maybe this is an aspect of all the Spider-Man ones that are well done, is that there's something genuinely there that we can take from it and do ourselves, right?
Hmm.
Like the stuff that he does, yeah, he's swinging from webs and he's, kicking guys out of the way, and he's, uh, you know, bonking muggers on the head with their own guns, and all this kind of stuff, right? And we can't do that, but we can do these tiny little acts of, like you said, doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And I think that's something that the majority of superhero stories miss. They're more about fantasy and projection than they are
Hmm.
about real life lessons that you can actually use. And yeah, I love that.
Well, and I think it's because Spider-Man is born out of, I think everybody to some extent has had an experience. It's not going to be as dramatic as Peter's, where, you know, you failed to do something that was in your power of control, but and as a result, you directly suffered from it. I think that's something that everybody can relate to. I think we've all had that at some point in our lives. I think that's a very human thing that I don't know if it was on purpose or if it was accidental that Ditko and Stanley just tapped into in that initial Spider-Man story. But at the same time, I think that's why Spider-Man sometimes struggles as a character, is he means so many different things to different people. And it's because that human element is so varied and so personal that it can be different for everybody. Where Batman and Superman, these other icons in the industry or in the medium, you know, their themes are a little bit more universal, whereas Spider-Man is so hyper personalized. I think that's why there's so much divisiveness on how he's portrayed.
Yeah, I think you're right. Most of the superheroes that come to mind, Batman, Superman, Daredevil,
Yeah,
Flash,
Captain
even
America.
Captain America, right? They all have to some extent they're platonic ideals, and I know that
Mhm.
the latest like absolute Batman and absolute Superman, these are exploring exactly that. What are the quintessential characteristics of
Mhm.
that? And I think you could certainly tell a story like that with Spider-Man, but it would just be one more valid take on
Yeah.
what Spider-Man could be. And the essential characteristics of Spider-Man are not superhero related.
Mhm.
They're just being a good person, and
Yeah.
he's messy, he's human. You described him earlier as just a bum, but I think it's more that he has the only ambition he has is to be part of the neighborhood that he's in and make it a better place.
Yeah.
And I don't think that makes him a bum. I think that makes him a kind of citizen that we don't have enough of today.
Well, and I think the thing is, the only reason he's even viewed as a bum or a loser is because he's constantly putting aside his own self gain
Right.
for the interests of others, and as a result, he's going to suffer from that. Which I think, and nobody knows that he's suffered. Everybody thinks like Peter Parker's like, oh, he's always late, or he's never on time, or he's a flake or stuff like that, and it's because he's doing something greater. And the thing is, I think we get these small stories in this book. This woman shares the story of, oh, he helped me carry my groceries home once because my bags broke open, and even though his web smelt funny and my ice cream melted because I couldn't get him out, like he was just trying. And I think that's what's important is Peter didn't think it through, but he was just in the moment. What can I do? Here's a solution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is the book that I give to people when they're like, oh, okay, like I just want to read a comic and I'm a Spider-Man fan, and I think this is the book that gets it. The only thing I think, actually, one of the biggest things working against Spider-Man to some extent is the movies, and
Mm.
the Raimi movies in particular, because I enjoy those films, but I think Spider-Man is sometimes hurt by being the only superhero in his universe, because as a result of him being the only one around, he takes on more of those he takes on a paragon role, like more akin to like Superman or something like that, where he's singular. Where I think Spider-Man excels when there's a backdrop of superheroes doing these greater world-ending things, and he's just doing the simple things.
Yeah, he needs the contrast, I guess. That's a
Hmm.
great point. I think that that's it's really important to think about the ecosystem kind of the heroes and villains, and Spider-Man knows exactly what it is that he's focused on. He knows what's important to him, and he'll do that other stuff if it comes up and impinges on his domain, right? And the things that
Yeah,
he cares about, but his the things that he cares about are very local.
yeah, yeah. No, so I don't know. That's our thoughts on this book. Did you have anything else, Daniel, before you wanted to call it a wrap?
100% recommend. I have
Yeah,
zero concerns with this book.
yeah. No, if you're gonna like read any book from this stinking show, like this is the one to read. It'll take you 15 minutes. Like, just check it out. Thank you guys for watching.